Welcome to another episode of Burn Your Boats podcast. Today's episode, we interview Dan Levy. Dan has taken the ultimate burn your boats journey. Dan was your classic, highly paid, tech, Silicon Valley, stressed out of his mind earner, living his life by the seat of his pants, chewing his fingernails, really understanding that this was not a sustainable lifestyle. He knew it, and more importantly, physically, his body was reacting to the stress and anxiety of the situation he found himself in. Highly paid on the outside, everybody would say that they were killing it as a couple. But inside, it wasn't working out. So he took the ultimate journey and the ultimate decision to burn their boats. They decided to get into real estate, but they didn't just tinker around the edges of real estate. They got in with both feet. And this is an inspirational hour where we will walk you through Dan's challenges, how they approached real estate, why they decided real estate was the vehicle, and how they ultimately entirely freed themselves from W-2 stress, the political and anxiety stresses of getting older in the workplace, to ultimate freedom and sitting back in a lake house, their feet up, thinking about the future, free, entirely free of financial burdens. This is an inspirational episode. I ask you to stay with it in the first 10 or 15 minutes because some of it is quite painful to listen to Dan's journey, and ultimately, like your favorite romantic comedy, there's an amazing ending, and it is a really sobering and important episode. If you are walking in the shoes of the W-2 earner or the stressed and anxious, mid-30s, mid-40-year-old, not knowing exactly where you're going, but knowing what you're doing is not sustainable. We have a great episode today. Take inspiration from it, and let's get right in. Okay, we have one of my favorite people in the world on our show today, Dan Levy. Welcome to the show, Dan. I met you 7 or 8 years ago. You were in the midst of deciding to burn your boats, but you hadn't quite burned them yet, and you were still dealing with some, issues that I could only say that I can empathize with myself, in that, I think the word that I might use is burnout. But we can talk about that in more detail a little bit more. But Dan, welcome to the show. Your story is truly inspirational in how you have freed yourself entirely. You have changed in the time that I've known you. You are the personification of Burn Your Boats. Yeah. You are the living, walking, talking example that we talk about every day. Every time we release an episode, it's one thing for us to get out there and bring the heroes in and talk rah, rah, rah about millions and billions. But for most of us, why we listen to these shows is that we want to free ourselves mentally, emotionally, and financially, so that we can live life genuinely on our terms, and that we can do things that we want to do when we wake up in the morning. And you, Dan, are the personification of that story. So, Dan, here's what I know. A boy in Australia walks into a bar and he meets a beautiful American girl. And from there, that's where I know your story begins, but there's a lot more to it than that. Dan, do you want to tell us a little bit about you, where you grew up, and a little bit about your background, Dan?
Sure. Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, guys. So yeah, I was living in Australia and I was doing a whole bunch of personal development stuff, which is actually where I met my amazing wife, Katie. We lived together for a little while in Australia, but then things weren't working out for her work-wise, so we came chasing work in the States, where she got a great job working in tech in California, North California, in Silicon Valley. When I moved from Australia, I was doing HVAC stuff. I decided to burn that boat and go over and do something completely different, which I'd never done professionally before. I started working in events. I did some hotel AV stuff, worked for another production company, and then talked myself into getting a job at another really, really big tech company. I actually got to host and produce events at Facebook. Again, it's something I never expected to do, but it was pretty cool for a while. A little while into that, I realized that I had a lot of trouble saying no to people. I'd take on just about any event because I wanted to, impress the folks there and do some really cool stuff, which I definitely got to do for a while. A little ways into that, I think I was working 60 to 80-hour weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a good challenge. You can do it for a little while, but after a little while, it really takes its toll. You tend to notice things start coming up in your body, and maybe sleep isn't so good, and maybe not making the best health choices, food, alcohol, all those sort of things. And yeah, I kind of got a little lucky in that the pandemic happened. Not many people say that, but the pandemic happened and it actually shut down events. A little bit before that, we'd started doing a little bit of real estate investing. Like we actually met you at a hotel convention that was all about real estate investment, David. That's where we met you guys. I want to say it was 7 or 8 years ago. We purchased a couple of single families, and we're like, this actually makes sense. What we're doing now is we've been talking about it for a while, and we've been educating ourselves by listening to podcasts and reading books. But we were both still working full time. My wife actually now, at the moment, it's probably important to note, she still works full time in her W-2 for a very well-known tech company. Yeah, it's been, I don't know how to explain it. It's been quite a ride.
Dan, when I met you all those years ago, you guys were, young, super young, you're probably in your early 30s. You're both super successful, working on paper, super successful, working for like the top tech companies out there. And I know your wife, Katie, is very much elevated in a large, well-known tech company. And then you were working this, 60, 80 hours a week when I met you. And if you don't mind my saying this, and this episode today, guys, is so inspirational, but we're going to get into a little bit of the vulnerabilities. You were working, you just moved over to the United States from Australia. And I think, it's probably fair to say that there was a lot of change in that, you were married, you were outside your friendship group and your familiar world. And now you're living in Silicon Valley. Now, one of the reasons why I think this is very important is a good chunk of our listeners are based in Silicon Valley, right? A good chunk of the people who are going to hear this are also working for tech companies, or their spouse works for tech companies. And so tech is going to be something that comes up time and time again in this conversation today. But in doing so, you guys were, let's say, the standard issue Silicon Valley couple, chasing a dream, chasing a very, very high income, but something started to trip up in you in particular.
Yeah.
And I bring this up because it happened to me also earlier on in my life. And I don't talk about this a great deal, but I started to have physical manifestations in my health to stress and anxiety as I was building up my my career, and I was trying to identify where I fit in the world and what I was good at, and what I enjoy doing as well. What you're good at is not necessarily what you enjoy doing. So finding myself. And I think that's probably a better way to describe it, created a great deal of anxiety. And if anybody's out there listening right now and can identify with this just sense of anxiety about trying to find yourself, and who are you and where are you going, and particularly if you're in your 30s, you feel this really deep sense of it. And it can lead to ill health and neurological issues, where you can find yourself going down a rabbit hole of trying to find out why. What's the reason for this? Why have I got numbness in my hands? Why do I have back pain? Why do I have headaches all the time? Why do I have, fill in the blank? And when I met you, I remember having a conversation, a very long conversation. We were driving around all day doing some real estate. I don't know if we talked much about real estate that day, but I did think we talked a lot about, anxiety in particular in your early 30s, right? As you knew in your heart of hearts that what you were doing and the amount of time that you were doing and the dedication that you were doing it, that you were giving it, and the people you were working with, if I'm not mistaken, you found all that very stressful. And you were looking for a new direction in your life. And you and Katie found real estate, and that was a super highway for you particularly. Can you talk to us a little bit, Dan, about that phase of your life when, neurologically and psychologically you weren't doing so well, and why you felt like, in hindsight, now that you're completely cured and healed, but why do you think that was? Can you look back at that and share that with us? Would that be okay?
Yeah, no problems. I was experiencing a lot of the things that you mentioned as well, actually, David. Crazy back pain, I was having gut issues, nerve pain, fatigue, headaches, like all that sort of stuff. I went to see a bunch of doctors, and they all wanted to just drug me up and medicate me and try to deal with the symptoms without, trying to hit the root cause of what was going on. At that time, I was just stressed all the time. You say working 60, 80-hour weeks. And when you think about it, you think it's just a number, but outside of that, that might be the recorded time I was actually at my job. But I was up at 4 a.m. getting ready to head into work, to go around and check on the events that I'd set up the night before, and it maybe finished at 11, 12, 1 in the morning sometimes. You throw the amount of time you're actually physically working on stuff, and then I don't know if you've ever been to any big events before, but in general, the food is, I don't know, it's
not healthy.
It's not healthy.
Sugary shit's the word you're looking for.
Yeah, sugary stuff. Then there's like everything's deep fried, and it's all just carbs and not good stuff. There's not very much actual healthy produce in there. It's all just whatever they can mass produce to feed 300 to 500 to 1,000 people. And half the time I was probably just living on Red Bulls and protein bars.
How old were you, Dan, when you were going through this time period? Just so the listener knows, kind of like their age.
41 now. I was probably like in my 33 to 6, around that sort of time. Maybe in 37, I was still experiencing symptoms. And
when did you start to see? So you move over, you're working for a big tech company doing the events. How long when you were doing your 60 to 80 hours where you started to see like, okay, Red Bull's not fixing this problem? It's not, I know I have energy, but I feel like shit, right? So
yeah.
how long did you start to go before you started to see symptoms of like, something's not right here?
Probably about a year. I was just toughing it out for, I don't know, I was just jamming ahead just to do whatever I had to do to get there. It was probably about a year of like, something's really not right. I thought it was just maybe I pulled something in my back, or maybe I just haven't had a lot of sleep this week. Maybe I had a couple too many drinks that other night or something like that. But I never really put it all together of that it was like a combination of all those things plus the stress. Something you mentioned, David, as well, is like the internal side of things. Like when I'm working through, I'm not actually taking any time to think about my future or where I'm going from there. I'm just living day to day. And then there's those in-between times, that moment here or there where something pops up in your head that goes, you can't do this forever.
You're not a robot, right?
Right. You're not a machine where you can just get, oil change out cogs and a few fan belts, and you're back to square one. If you mess up your body, it's not always just a quick snap, get things back to scratch.
Dan, I think a lot of listeners that are in that kind of high stress environment, at work, and then maybe they come home and it's a different type of stress, and then you've got the challenges with just life in general, and they see something and they're like, my back hurts, this hurts, and it's like, oh, I'm just not getting enough sleep. And I know we kind of talked a little bit this before the episode, but it's like, do you want to fix the symptom, right? You went to these doctors, they're like, here's a pill, take it, that'll may fix it, it may not, right? And they're just sticking a Band-Aid on it. I know a lot of people listening to this could be in better shape, right? They could eat healthier, but it's hard, right? When you're working 60 hours, it's hard not to just go to the catered lunch and grab the cheeseburger and the fries, right? Because it's there, you're hungry, and then you got to get back to work, right? You're not going to have this freshly made salad that you bring to work every day because you got to get the kids up in the morning, and then you've got to do all that. Talk to us a little bit about, why it is that you feel that when you met with these doctors and they kept putting Band-Aids on it, like, what was going through your mind in terms of like the frustration of like, I don't think that these highly paid, highly educated professionals are really taking my best interest at heart. I'm just curious as to like what was going through your mind. Like, is there an answer? Because I don't think this is the answer.
I went to see a few different doctors and they all had a different opinion as to what was actually going on. They all just wanted to throw out a couple of different 2 or 3 letter labels for it. And all of those things had different, different solutions that they thought were solutions. And I went to one doctor, she said MS. I went to another doctor, they said some autoimmune stuff. I went to another doctor and they said something different. And I'm like, isn't this supposed to be science? Isn't there supposed to be like 0 or 1 response to this, a yes or a no? It's definitely this, it's not this, tests show, whatever. And I was like, I think at that point, like after seeing the 3rd one and getting a different response, I was like, I don't know that this is actually what's going on. I feel like there's something here, something in your head or something in my body that is like, something's not right, and I don't feel like the solution for it is take another pill or make sure you're getting 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night. Life's never going to be perfect for you in the way that you might hope, and you'll never have ideal everything where life is going to be perfect enough that everything just lines up, especially in the world we live in today is such, fast paced, things are changing so often. The idea that you're going to just be able to do the same thing and have a nice relaxing night or day all the time is just, I think it's a bit of a myth.
Right. I recall meeting you. Okay. You were in the midst of this, all I can kind of say to what we've just been talking about for the last, 9 or 10 minutes is that I would say Dr. Google was a big part of your life back then. Okay.
Gosh, yeah. To anyone that has stuff going on, don't do that. It'll just
WebMD.
Yeah. Dr. Google is going to freak you out, right?
Oh.
And so that can add more and more layers to this. But here is where this real story begins for me anyhow. I met you and I was driving around here in the Tampa region and I listened to your story and we were talking about it at length. I went, Dan, I promise you, I wasn't a doctor at the time. So I promise you, you're just in the wrong place. You're just in the wrong environment. And I promise you, you're going to get better, right? I could see so clearly what you were dealing with because I had gone through exactly the same stuff, symptom for symptom. Like, you're not going to up me on the symptoms and you're not going to up me on the Dr. Googling and you're not going to up, I remember it. I remember it so well. I think some of our listeners will identify with this. Some of our listeners will not, but you had to make a change. You had to burn your boats and you and your wife decided that she was going to hold on to her, high paying tech job. And you were going to commit yourself to full-time real estate. And this is where this conversation is going to take a dramatic turn to the upside. From here on out in this story, everything changes. This is the part in the romantic comedy where they all get back together again. They live happily ever after. So let's get into it. Dan, I met you and you started buying some small entry-level single-family homes, which is how most real estate investors begin to free themselves. But your story diverges very, very quickly from there. You guys genuinely decided to commit yourselves to freeing yourselves. you decided to, okay, if Dan in this scenario is going to become a full-time real estate investor, Dan needs to be a full-time real estate investor. So you guys came out of the hatches like, greyhounds. You bought your first property. I don't think it was, you were just, I don't know, 2 or 3 months into your first property. You're knocking on my door. You're ready for another one. I'm like, these guys are not they're not messing around. I think we did another one, and then you called me. You guys found another deal, and I helped you out, put all that deal together. And then like you're 3 single family homes in, right?
Yep.
And then this is where the story really takes an evolutionary leap. You buy a house then in Santa Clara. You tell me, it was like 900 square feet or something like that. You paid 900 grand for it.
It was, I think just over 900 square feet, and it was close to $1 million. It was $1 million heap of trash.
$1 million pile of garbage in Santa Clara, right? And I remember you guys telling me that, and I was like, fair play, like that's, even then I thought that was a big, gutsy, ballsy move. But then you went one up on that one. You pulled an Airstream into your backyard.
Yeah.
And then you added what, 450 square feet to it?
Yeah, about 450 square feet. We spent what was supposed to be three to 4 months. Started out as 3 to 4 months. Ended up being 9 months living in the trailer on the muddy lot while my wife is taking all her meetings inside this Airstream. Man, that was
was that your first like house that you guys moved into, that you lived in, that you bought?
Yeah. So that was the first one we bought and moved into. We tied it up.
Kind of moved into it.
Yeah. We moved into it for like 3 months, I think.
I was about to say, I don't think you spent more than 90 nights in that house.
No, that was about right. It was like 3 months before we then found a trailer, put it in the backyard, and turned our home into a construction zone. And COVID in California was pretty crazy. Lockdowns were pretty hefty. Getting anything done that involved more than 2 people was just a no. Yeah, good way to really test out your marriage. Living in square feet together, and a shower that you can't move your arms out in, and good challenge.
Good challenge for sure, but that turned out to be the very best thing that you guys probably have ever done, because what a springboard that turned out to be.
Right.
You guys learned a lot about building in California. I remember going like blow by blow. I check in with you, make sure you're okay as a human being, right? So you learned a lot about, contractors, permitting, California, how it has its own way of doing things. Just to cut a long story short for the guests, you guys finished it up, and you have an ARV, an after renovation value. After you build take you a year, you add your 450 square feet, cost you $400,000. So now you're in for $1.4 million, right? But then you get a evaluation of your property, and it's worth 1.7, 1.8 million. Okay.
I think we got it up to maybe 1.9 or something like that.
Right off the bat, right?
Yeah, where we refied at like a little over, it might be just under 3% because rates were great. We pulled out as much as we could, and like you said, springboard, we use that to just go absolute gangbusters here in Florida. So
you guys were the king of burring. So you guys burred the backside off that. And this is where I want you to jump in. You stopped buying single family homes then. And I've never seen anybody get so dedicated to buying, leasing every dime of equity that you guys had in a deal to roll it into another one. And you guys went into the tell me then, because this is where you guys just went parabolic, absolutely parabolic, and genuinely freed yourself financially. So can you take us from that? You finished California, and then tell us what you did next.
Sure. So we moved out here to Florida because we knew that with price points, with what we can get per square foot, and our basic knowledge of the market here now, that was a great start. Also, having amazing environment around us, really supportive folks like yourself, David, who we could bounce ideas off. We could, without knowing exactly 100% of the details of particular areas of St. Petersburg and Tampa, we could go hey, David, we've come across this. What's your first,
Yeah.
what's your first impression of this kind of thing? Having somebody else that knows the market that you're going into is super important. So yeah, we moved out here. I think it was December of 2020. We stayed in a couple of Airbnbs for a few months, but we then purchased a triplex. That was, and this is a great tip for people looking at real estate and looking for a great deal. It was mislabeled. It was labeled as a single family, but it was actually a triplex and a legal one as well.
Wow.
So we got that for a great price. We then moved into one unit while we waited for our tenants' leases to expire. We then fixed up those two units. We turned them all into Airbnbs. Then we found a duplex. We did the same thing there. So we moved around a little bit in that first year. We stayed in the unit, we fixed up the others, and just sort of moved on and kept doing that.
Dan, talk to us about you just described house hacking, right?
Yeah.
You guys are making, your wife's making great money, and you guys are living in like a 786 square feet next to a bunch of tenants paying $1,100 a month rent, right?
Right. Yeah.
A lot of people listening right now, Dave and I talk all the time about delayed gratification. It's like, how do you look to the future and not take all the chips off the table? It's hard to take, to delay your gratification when you're living in a $3,800 a month, high rise in whatever downtown, you're living at. Talk to us about the mentality, how it was every day, waking up in that 1-1 where the rent is $1,150, and you're going to get tenants that are going to live in an $1,100 a month unit right next door to you and across the street from you on the property you don't own. That couldn't have been easy, right? Like that's not, and you're not 22 years old anymore, right? Like you're not a bachelor, you're married, you've got married people stuff, you've probably got married people cars, you're in your 30s, right? Yet you're in this probably C+ location, and you're surrounded by Section 8, you're surrounded by, bad landlords. I'm just interested as to how long did you live like that, where you're bouncing from house to house, unit to unit in your own portfolio? Because a lot of people will say, oh yeah, I'll buy there, but I would never live there, right? Well, you kind of go against that. I'm just curious as to how did that impact your marriage at all? Did you guys have fights that you may not have? Talk to us a little bit about how that was during that experience.
Sure. It definitely added a little bit of an edge to everything. We eventually, it was like a month or two, lived in our really nice house in Santa Clara. So we lived in a 3-bed, 2.5 bath, almost 1,500 square foot place that was done up really nice. Modern Scandinavian style, open floor plan. We went from that to...
So even more difficult, right? Because now you went backwards. You lived in the super nice house, and now you're rolling back down the hill.
Yeah. So we moved into the first one that was almost a 2-bedroom. It was like 1 bedroom and a tiny little office. And yeah, it was a little emotional challenge. It was like, come on, we've just been through all this stress and all this challenge and all these issues of construction stuff to then throw ourselves back into the middle of it. It was definitely like, we did question ourselves, like, are we doing this right? Are we doing the right thing? And I suppose time has definitely told, in which putting aside that extra nice living to set yourself up for real wealth. Yeah, like the only thing I think do differently now is I would have done more of it, but
wow.
we did this for 2 years of hopping around from unit to unit while we fixed up others. And while the neighborhood was okay, living in a construction site, it's definitely not all it's cracked up to be. I don't know if it's cracked up to be anything at all, really, but it's everything's dusty all the time. You're always tracking mud in and out the house. You're covered in paint flecks. You somehow get it everywhere. I don't know how. But yeah, it definitely has an impact on your day-to-day living. But again, the only thing I'd do different is I would have done more of it.
More of it. There's Sato. The only thing I'd have done
Yeah.
different, I'd have done more of it. We just literally we recorded a podcast yesterday with a very proficient real estate professional, and that's his only regret in life. I wish I'd done more of it.
Right.
Dan, I do know the locations that you bought in. I know them very well, and you did not go down for the most part the C-class stuff, albeit that you definitely
You have some.
so you definitely have
Started.
some. We've all got a Section 8 up our sleeves, you know. We all have one or two of those that we don't, pipe on about. We all have them and they're great cash flow. But then this is where I want to bring the listeners on. You pivoted again in all of this. The reason why I want to jump in here at this point is I watched all of this go down, and I equally watched your symptoms disappear as you start having this kind of new meaning, this new direction, this new, you get up in the morning, you have this fundamental direction that is based on your wife and you, and it's a real team, and you guys are heading in a direction that is all about the rewards are all yours. You're not just getting up to do some event and then you do, another event tomorrow. At the end of the day, if you get fired or not, nobody really cares. All of your symptoms start to melt away during this period of time. And then you take the real springboard. But Dan, you were about to say something. What was it?
Yeah, I actually realized that I had this kind of pattern throughout all my jobs that I'd had, probably since I was about 25, 26, was I'd get in there, I'd get excited for a year or two, probably two at the most, and then I would start to get frustrated with things, either with the systems they had set up or with lack of systems sometimes. Like I could see all these things that I thought could be improved and changed and, help guys like me that doing the work day to day, or just make a few more bucks for my boss or something like that. And I would kind of hit this point a couple of years into every job where I was like, I'm kind of fed up with this. And I think it was like myself trying to tell myself I should be doing my own thing. And I know how to explain it better, but like all the time that stress was building up and these symptoms were building up, I think it was myself trying to tell myself, you should be doing your own thing and building something for your own future, not just like trying to make your boss an extra buck or two or something like that. I mean, it's really important to be able to add value to the people around you, so that you're obviously getting something back for that value, whether it's a wage or a bonus or something like that. I feel like you've got to be able to feel solid in doing something for yourself as well.
And what is that? You wake up in the morning and you're doing something for yourself. What is that special thing? Even if it's just going over to one of your places to mow the lawn, it's not high value work, but it's what kind of reward are you getting that's different than earning 250 grand a year for somebody else?
Seeing that wealth multiplying and setting ourselves up so that we can actually live the life we want, instead of living the life that society tells us we should live, work your 9 to 5, be happy with that, do that for 50 or 60 years until you can retire or until you can say you've got enough in your 401k to last you for that last 10 or 15 years of your life. Instead of listening to that pre-programmed speech that we're told is what you're supposed to do, creating something of value for yourself that creates time freedom. Because I mean, people working lots of hours and making a lot of money, quite often what comes with that is a lot of stress and a lot of like time that's no longer yours. It's time that's dedicated to your clients, to your boss, to whoever it is. And that, for some people, sure, it can be fulfilling, but for me, it wasn't. Like I said, I'd get excited for that 6 months of that first year, and then for the next year, I'd be picking holes at everything that the company was doing or that we were doing, and I'd be like, we can be doing this better. Why aren't we doing this better, more efficiently? And when I hit that point, I think it took a few cycles of doing that to realize that I should be doing this because I need to start building up something for myself.
I think, Dan, if there's anyone watching on YouTube right now. I've got Compound Effect behind me, and I've read it. It's by Darren Hardy. I've read it, 4 or 5 times. And, I'm hearing you say, well, you could work 60 hours, right? And maybe you could work 60 hours in your own company. And they're not created equal, right? Because when you're working 60 hours in your own company, right? Like you're planting your seeds, right? And guess what those seeds do? They grow, right? And guess what? Then you can go home for the night. You watered them during the day. You go home, you go to sleep, and they're still growing, right? And it's very hard to compound your efforts when you're working for a boss, no matter how good, bad you are, whether you work 40 hours, 60 hours, or 5 hours a week. And I think that there's something, that feeling of like, I'm building something, and it's going to compound on itself, right? That I think alleviates some stress, because it's like, this is worth it. Like what I'm doing is worth it. And whereas it sounds like when you were in your kind of W-2 stuff, it's like, is it worth it? I'm raising my hand. I've got better systems, and you keep bumping your head against the ceiling, and that ceiling, it sounds to me like it's pretty low. How many times did you maturations did you have to go through before you finally said, all right, I'm lighting these damn boats on fire? And I know it was a combination, and because we've talked a lot, we've talked to a few people, and we'll talk to a lot more, where they were bumping their head against the corporate ceiling, but you have this other, limb on your tree, which is like, my health is now declining. So it's like, which is it that's burning your boats? Is it the fact that your health is forcing you out of what you're doing and you need to drastically change? Is it you're getting tired after a year or two of not being heard, raising your hand, and them telling you to put your hand down, Dan, we don't need your comments? Which would you say was more impactful in your kind of exit from, W-2 world into what you're currently doing now?
The health stuff. Like that was, I think all the other times it's like, if you're like getting up to a threshold, say your threshold's out of 10 for something, working for someone else and doing the 9 to 5 thing, or what was it, like 5 to 1 thing, like that builds up, maybe gets you to a 7 or 8 out of 10 threshold. But then when my health started failing, it very quickly went to like a 10 out of 10 or 12 out of 10, because if you don't have your health, you don't have anything, right? If you can't physically get out of bed at the start of the day and feel okay just moving around and doing basic things, like what kind of a life is that? If for those people that have kids, like working crazy hours and then getting to see your kids for an hour a day, like, is that a good life? Is that something that your kids will appreciate? I know for some people it's not a choice at the moment, but I think at some stage you have to make a choice to start doing something for yourself. And if that means, making sure you can put aside $1,000 a month so that you can buy your first single family somewhere that starts then, as you've mentioned, compounding in value, so that, you can get to a stage in your life where you don't have to rely on spending your 40, 60 hours a week on something that someone else deems valuable. You're able to create a life of freedom for yourself. And that, again, that was for me, like knowing, I've seen some family members that had a much shorter life than what they were expecting. I think that was something big for me. Like I had a parent die when I was 19, and it was because of the choices they made that were not supporting their positive health. And that was a big thing for me. It impacted me for a lot of years, and it impacted a lot of the choices that I made then going on. It was when I start to notice this thing that we call health, like, that slips below a certain level, and you're like, hang on, I've seen other people do this, I've seen the results, it's not good. In fact, it's devastating, it's life-ending. And I don't have children at the moment, but I'm really looking forward to having children and knowing that I can spend time with them because I've made choices to grow our wealth. Like I love the idea of being a stay-at-home dad. I mean, I'm sure I'll work like 10 or 20 hours a week doing real estate stuff, but I'll have the choice of when I do that and how I do that.
Amen.
Because of the choices I've made in the past, or that my wife and I have made, to delay a little gratification, maybe not take that extra vacation a year, maybe don't upgrade that car, I moved to the States. I bought that was like, I moved to the States maybe 9 years ago, and I bought a $3,000 car. We could have got a loan, like
Right.
Katie had a good enough job that we could have paid off a loan on a $30,000 or $40,000 car, but I didn't need that. Like, I knew that the money that we were going to be able to put into something more beneficial that would actually compound was going to do so much more for us than a flashier car when I pull up and then park it all day at work, you know?
Mm. But then I'm going to move your story on a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I know you very well, and we are in the kind of the next phase of this story. You moved on from buying what I would consider, except for one or two C-class type locations that have actually not C-class. You were buying in a really, really fast up and coming neighborhood. But you've also bought a lot of A-class multifamilies. In doing so, you created millions of dollars of equity for yourselves. And then you took that equity and you recycled it again. And then I remember you coming to me and you were telling me you were buying, for all intents and purposes, another duplex, but it was a, $1 million duplex, but it was, this monster house with another monster house on whatever, 2 acres of land, right? On essentially on a lake in a bougie neighborhood. I was like, wow, there to go again, surprising me. And then you converted the second unit there to an Airbnb, killing it on that Airbnb. And Dan, do you want to tell the listeners what I was in last week with you, your latest acquisition? Because this one's full cycle. Tell me the last thing that you bought in the real estate world, when you bought it, what it is, and what's your thinking behind it.
Sure. So we recently bought a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,000 square foot. So it's not huge, but a really cute little lake house. It's on a private lake, so no public access. It's spring fed, which means it's crystal clear all the time. It's on, I think, 1/3 of an acre. We spent a little over 20 grand fixing it up, making it look pretty, and that will be a luxury Airbnb. It's in a great spot because it's quiet, but it's still only maybe 25 minutes from downtown Tampa. We've been doing Airbnb stuff since we moved to Florida, and I actually listening to one of your other podcasts. You talked about systems to do with that and how it's a business. That's an amazing episode for anyone who is interested in that. They should go listen to that episode now. As I think maybe 7 or 8 or something like that, episode 7 or 8. But yeah, we put a lot of systems into place so that even now managing 7 Airbnbs, it's maybe 10 to 15 hours work a week, which is wonderful. But yeah, this lake house that we bought, it's going to be for predominantly Airbnb, but we're also going to put our family in there when they come to stay. We're going to be able to put our friends in there when they come into town. It's like 10 minutes from our actual house, which is great. It's such a serene, nice, beautiful spot. I can't wait to use it, actually.
Well, I've got some bad news for you, Dan. I got some real bad news for you about that lake house.
Oh,
I heard the house next door is for sale, and some rowdy bunch of Irish people have bought it.
I'd
That's
sell
true.
immediately, Dan. Sell immediately.
Sell it before
Dump
sell it before the Irish get here. It's going to rain every day, Dan.
no,
Dump
we can't wait to have you guys as neighbors. It's a fantastic spot. I did see it went pending after you'd gone through to check it out. I hadn't yet hit you up to see if that was you guys, but yeah, congratulations. It's going to be awesome having you guys as little vacay neighbors.
Well, we're going to build a 44-story condominium community with a pool party every Sunday. But the point is, in doing that, I sat out with you last week, just in the serenity of a lake on a Monday or Tuesday or whatever it was. And that is what real estate can do for you. It's almost like full circle. Like, you're not done. We're not done. But you have come absolutely full circle. Can you, if you don't mind my sharing, can you tell me ballpark You don't have to tell me your numbers, but I think you got like 20, 20, 21, 22, 23 doors now. You've got millions and millions of dollars worth of real estate. You've got very low debt. Can you walk us through, just briefly share it? You don't have to go through your whole details, but just whatever you think you want to share.
Yeah, we've got 19 doors now. I think that's 10 properties in total. So a bunch of small multis, a few single families. I think we have around $3 million worth of debt in that, and it's, I think, worth around 7 million-ish.
So you have created $4 million plus of wealth whilst you have been working 10 hours a week healing.
We've been able to take the time to focus on what's important to us, working that probably on average, maybe closer to 20 hours a week. But that means I've been able to take time to make sure I can make my own healthy food, and then not only that, but afford to be able to hire somebody who was then doing our food prep for us. I can get up and casually walk the dog every morning, get home, check my emails. I make sure I take an extra day off every week, just like to tune out, to do something I love doing, whether it's spearfishing with some buddies or going out on hikes in public land to go hunting, or sitting down and playing a board game with some friends. Like I can take the time to do that. I was able to host my family who came over from Australia this past Christmas. They came over for like a month, and I was able to maybe work a couple of hours a week at that point, so I could really be there and be present with them, show them what my life in Florida is like, take them down to the Everglades. It was amazing. I got to have that time, and like I said, we're looking forward to expanding our family and actually to be there with my kids. I can't wait to do that. I was even able to take another 2 weeks off just to go back to Australia recently and go see a family member and enjoy their wedding. The things that you can't do when you're working, when you're working your W-2 job, you're strapped all the time, you've got hardly any time to go to the gym or to do things that are physically healthy for you to make sure you're going to be around long enough to enjoy it and to enjoy your kids, to enjoy your family. Being able to focus now on what's really important has been literally life-changing.
Dan, let me highlight something, because it's very powerful what you've said. You said you had 7 million in real estate, you had 3 million in debt. For all the math majors out there, we can do some quick math to figure out what that kind of worth gives you in terms of equity. But you have this $4 million in equity. You now have your health back, which is infinitely worth more than $4 million of equity. Definitely. The thing is that, could you, this is a bit of a rhetorical question, but could you have stayed in your job, your 60 to 80 hour a week job, had your wife continue to work her tech job? How long would it have taken you to save $4 million in the bank after your expenses? I'm just curious how long you think that would have taken you.
30 years, 40,
30
50.
years. So let's say that you worked really hard and you kept driving that $3,000 car, right? So let's say 20 years to save that 4 million. And in that 20 years, by the way, that 4 million would be, inflation would have screwed it all up, right? So 20 years to save. But oh, by the way, you're working 10 to 20 hours a week, right? So you have this 4 million, you have this business now you've built with systems and Airbnbs and all that. And you're spearfishing how many days a week? At least 1 day a week, maybe two?
At some stages, it's 1 or 2 days a week. Other times, I might not go for a week or two. But yeah, I'm able to I'm able to spend weekends with my wife because, she gets weekends off. But then also to take another day outside that just to do something I love. Yeah, it's a game changer.
But on the surface, right? If you kind of wrote out what we've put into this episode, you bought, what did you call it? A $900,000 heap of trash. What did you call the house? What was your exact words?
Yeah, I think it's $1 million heap of trash.
$1 million heap of trash, right? And so you lived in the Airstream. You're living next to the in the 1-1s or the 2-1s in the C+ areas. But that amount of time that you delayed your gratification, you drove a $3,000 car, you lived in an Airstream, you bought a heap of trash, which was in most people's eyes, including my own, very risky, right? You bought a $900,000 heap of trash. But that delayed gratification, that ability to keep pushing things down the road and not taking the chips off the table. Now you're 41 years old and you go spearfishing. I've never been spearfishing, but I can imagine it's less stressful than setting up events at 12 o'clock at night and then just slamming 3 sugar-free Red Bulls, right? So this may be a stupid question, but looking back, was this worth it? Was it risky? Because a lot of listeners are going to think, oh, that's just too risky. I don't want to buy a $900,000 heap of trash. I don't want to live in an Airstream. So to you, was it worth it? And what do you say to the people that are thinking about this type of thing, about taking your blueprint that you've just laid out, right? And they're like, well, how do I have $4 million in equity? Like, what's the best way to do it? What do you say to those people? And was it worth it?
Infinitely worth it. I can't put a number on that to say what it's worth. It's worth everything, right? It's worth the rest of my life.
Right.
In terms of how you can get there, what you can do to achieve like a great, what I feel is a great level of success. I'm not all the way there yet. Obviously, there's still much more to go and more to achieve. But one thing that before jumping on this podcast, I was chatting with my wife about. One thing we did was we really, really learned our market. We did our research. We did numbers. I think before we bought that $1 million heap of trash, I think we may have looked in person at like 50 or 60 places, and maybe in total 120 or 130 places online. We learned our neighborhood. We learned what was worth something. We learned what was maybe a risky thing. We learned what was going to be a challenging thing. We spoke to people who knew more than we do about it. Like we spoke with a few contractors. We spoke with a few real estate agents. We didn't waste a ton of their time, though. We did a lot of research ourselves. Really, really did put the numbers in, put the time in before we made that, what some people would consider a risky purchase. Yeah. And for those people who think they can time the market, you know, I hear this all the time still, like even when people ask what I've done and how we've done it, they're like, oh, you timed the market really well. I'm like, we made some good decisions at good times, but now in just about any market, there are still great deals. You just have to do the research. You've got to do the numbers. You've got to put the time in to learn more than you know now.
It sounds like you have to work. It sounds like you got to kind of work hard. Yeah. That sucks.
For those first few years that we were getting into it, it was every weekend. We were going to look at houses. A few afternoons a week, we were going to look at houses. Yeah. And we would sit there on the couch next to each other, not necessarily the best way to connect, but we would sit there together, both of us on Redfin or Zillow, and just looking through listings and listings and listings going, this could work if we did this, right? And then we do the numbers on that. And then this could work if we maybe did that. Great. What's it going to cost to do a rehab on this sort of thing? And again, having an amazing environment around us who was supportive and had our backs and occasionally gave us a great pep talk. Like David, if it wasn't for you and a lot of inspiration that came from what you were doing and how you were also like, you were pumping us up. Like, you guys are smart enough. You're willing to put in enough work. You guys can do this. You can do what I'm doing now. That was so important for us. So for those of you that don't have a great environment around you, if all the people that you hang out with just want to party on the weekends, or they just want to go out drinking on a Friday night or something like that, if that's the people you're hanging around all the time, but you want this kind of life and lifestyle that we're able to live now, then you might want to consider, you know, burning those boats. But I still have some great buddies back in Australia and in California that they love what they're doing. They're happy with their current life. Will they be happy in 20 years' time? Who knows? I love to chat with them and help them out where I can, and also try to inspire them in the same way that I was inspired. Doesn't work for everyone, but that's okay. This isn't everyone's journey. It can be if you make the right choices, if you're willing to put the work in.
Dan, I have an old saying that we look like dummies the day we buy anything and geniuses 20 years later. This episode has been entirely about how all of us, every one of us, have these opportunities in front of us every day. You can decide to be cynical and ignore everything that Dan has just talked about for the last hour and everything that we talk about. If you're listening to us, I assume that you're not full of cynicism. But I remember sitting down with you a long time ago, and I think you are bang on target, because when I said it to you, I think you thought I was nuts. But I told you, try and buy yourself and Katie, we were sitting down. I was like, look, as a rule of thumb, you know, you guys are super, super well positioned. Let's just take that as a starting point to have a very highly paid tech spouse, and then have somebody who wants to go out and do real estate. Because one of the biggest upsides that we have not talked about yet is that you are now designated a real estate professional, and you can take bonus depreciation on all of the real estate that you guys go out and buy, thus taking all of the tax that your wife would otherwise have been paying, which is substantial. And that tax now stays inside your ecosystem, and it's not being, you know, peed away in taxes in Washington. And so that's like upside number one. You guys are taking bonus depreciation on these properties, and that is enormous. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go and learn what the power of designating a spouse a real estate professional, so that you get all the upside of bonus depreciation. That's number one. Number two, I'd like to point out also that I sat down with you one night and I said, try and dollar cost average into, like, you don't have to go crazy. Try and dollar cost average and try and buy $1 million worth of real estate a year, right? And you probably raised one eyebrow and went like, that's a bit nuts. But here we are, 7 years into your real estate journey, and you have $7 million worth of real estate.
There you go.
Pretty amazing.
Tell me I'm wrong.
No, definitely not. And I'm by no means not an accountant. I don't know probably anywhere near about this. I don't know enough about this sort of stuff as I probably should. But go speak, if you are interested in becoming a real estate professional, go and speak with an accountant who knows specifically a lot about this. And they will tell you, like you'd mentioned, depreciation, and there's like cost segregation. Of course, all the expenses you have as a real estate business professional. There are so much that you could be offsetting your tax with. It's nuts.
If you have a highly paid spouse, particularly so. It's an extremely powerful tool. So again, our podcast is called Burn Your Boats. That last hour it's moved me, listening to how you've burned your boats and you've freed yourself entirely. And we did an episode recently on deathbed regrets. And congratulations, Dan, you're not going to share 95% of them. You're not going to have the deathbed regrets that most people have, because in 7 years, you've taken your ill, unhealthy, dissatisfied, anxiety-ridden, highly stressed person I met, and you are now sitting at a lake house doing what you love, but equally getting up every morning with purpose. Your confidence level you're so sure of yourself now. You're so secure in what it is that you're doing, the direction you're going. I see the security that your marriage is so strong. Your marriage has been a massive beneficiary of this journey into real estate. So if anybody listening to us does not understand the power of thinking long-term and understanding the power of real estate, let Dan be the antithesis to your cynicism. And congratulations. Well done. You should be very proud of yourself. And thank you so much for joining our podcast today. Yeah. Any last words, Dan, as you walk out the door? Any last words?
I could not have done any of this, obviously, without the support of my amazing wife. Yeah, she was the one who helped me get through a lot of the health stuff. She was the one who has been supporting me 100% through this. Having somebody who has your back like that and is willing to go all in with you, also priceless. Like you cannot put a value on that.
I agree. If you do have these desires that Dan has to change your life and live life on your own terms, and you are with a spouse that doesn't see it or doesn't hear it, please have them listen to this episode. Please go back and share this with your spouse, or share this maybe with a friend who could do with listening to this story. Real estate, and everyone I know who spends their lives working in real estate, but more importantly, keeping real estate. And one thing we didn't even touch on today was the cash flow from your real estate now is probably sufficient to free your wife also from her W-2. If it's not there, it's pretty darn close.
We're getting close.
Yeah. So the cash flow is there as well. Clark, what was your take here? We're on our way out the door. We'll give you the last word here on Dan's journey.
And the thing that you said, you mentioned multiple times about surrounding yourself with good people, to be able to bounce ideas off of, being able to potentially burn your boats on your surroundings, your environment, for people that are just wanting to go out and drink on a Friday and talk about the game or whatever. That left a fairly lasting impression. And, I think that's being able to make it easier to make the right decision, being able to make it easier to not get distracted by things as we grow older, as we get more mature. These decisions aren't easy, right? These are like good friends that you have, good people around you, but they don't share the same vision for you. And I think probably a lot of people listening to this may be in that struggle. And so that's why we named this podcast Burn Your Boats, because it's burn your boats, but it's not like you have to financially burn your boats or burn your boats with your job. It means a whole host of things between your health, all those things. So I appreciate you sharing that with the listener and with us, because it's good to have that reminder. And I can't congratulate you enough. And the last thing too is David said, hey, you can do this, but you have to think long term. You did it in 7 freaking years. Like that's not 15 years. That's not 20 years. You've created that equity in a period of 7 years, to where you've created all the things that we've talked about over the last hour, and you've gotten so much healthier and you feel better. Hell, man, that's pretty damn fast in my book. So I would say that although we preach that it's going to probably take longer than it doesn't happen overnight, you're pressing that theory that you can actually do it much quicker. So I tip my cap to you, my friend, and I appreciate you coming on our show.
There are some great tools out there for everyone to get a hold of. There's some wonderful people to talk to and listen to. So many other great podcasts. You guys have been doing an awesome job. I love the info you're getting out there, the guests you're having on. I'm honored to be one of them. So thank you so much, guys, for having me on. I look forward to continuing the journey.
Onward.
See you guys. Thank you. All right, everybody. So I hope you enjoyed that pretty intimate conversation with Dan. And I'll tell you, David, there was a lot of things that left me thinking how important it is, and we get caught up in the small stuff. We sweat the small stuff, right? Does this cash flow? Does I've got this repair, and you've got Dan, who is essentially having all these health issues that he couldn't figure out what the hell was wrong. Doctors are telling him X, the next doctor is telling him Y. And all it came back to is that they were trying to fix symptoms. And ironically enough, it was his ability to burn his boat, to focus on his health and his stress and his anxiety. And I know that there's so many people that they're going through similar situations. And it's like, how I need my health, right? Like when you're on your deathbed, you're not going to say, I wish I would have bought another house, right? It's like, man, I wish I could have lived a healthier life. I wish I could have enjoyed more things. And now Dan is going to get a chance to experience a much more healthy lifestyle with much more lower anxiety. And he did it freaking fast. He's only been doing it for 7 years. So it left a lasting impression on me, and him being able to just take action and continually to stay the course, delay his gratification. And it was amazing. And I love it. And not maybe a lot of people know Dan because he kind of keeps a low profile, but he's just quietly working in the background, David, just buying these high quality assets, doing a great job managing them on an Airbnb. He's going against the grain. He's gone against the grain of a lot of, Facebook groups and podcasts and things where they're like, oh, go out and buy the $100,000 house and you put $20,000 down and you buy 10 of those. And, and he's kind of gone against the grain, and he quickly kind of evolved from buying one or two of those lower cost houses and then to buying the 2 or 3 unit. Now he's buying like high quality Airbnbs that are, have something special. They're on a lake. They're on, they have something that is unique about them, and they're not just like everything else. And, there's a lot to take away from that. So I loved it. I think Dan's going great. I'm excited to have him back for different topics. David, I know you've known Dan for longer than I have. I've known him for a couple of years, but I know you guys go back. Anything in particular that stood out in your mind before we exit stage left?
Okay. So, we didn't get into how Dan and Katie achieved what they achieved, but let me tell you, it's pretty simple. Okay. They did deals. They, on occasion came to me for a loan in order to buy the house, fix it up, and then they'd create some equity and they'd refi out. And after our call today, Dan disclosed to us that they actually only have about 100 grand of their own money left in their entire portfolio. 100 grand. So anybody who comes to me and says, well, we don't have the money, what Dan and Katie did was they leveraged her high income so that they could refi out. And then each refi that they did, their combined income went up, because now the debt to income ratio, if you will, goes higher, because they have the entire income of that quadplex or the triplex, in addition to a high W-2 income. And that's how it works, right? And so they bird essentially their way to absolute financial freedom. And I want to celebrate the quiet people in this industry. Most people you get to listen to on podcasts and books talk about very high levels of achievement. But 99.999% of real estate investors who freed themselves with real estate are just quiet. They're mom and pops that, bought 1, bought 2, bought 10, and have freed themselves financially. And you can be also financially free using real estate without having a podcast, or without being, going to the conferences, or without having a high profile. Most people in real estate don't have a high profile. So my takeaway from it is our podcast is different because we're interested in that story. I'm not interested in the billionaire. I'm not interested in the, 100,000 million zillion flips a year. Or I'm not interested in the guys or girls who built up a big business in some aspect of real estate. I'm interested in people burning their boats so that they achieve personal financial freedom, which allows them to step back from the stress and anxiety of other third-party expectations, like a boss or a company or colleagues, or fill in the gap. When you do that, you get really you're responsible for yourself and your tenants and your own little world. And I think what healed Dan in hindsight was his knowing his purpose. He wakes up every day, he knows what he has to do, and equally he knows what he doesn't have to do. So to all the unsung heroes out there who have freed themselves, I congratulate you. And to anybody out there who thinks that this cannot be their world, you're wrong. This can be your reality. That's my takeaway, Clark.
I agree with everything. And if you notice that Dan mentioned multiple times, David, that he keeps surrounding himself with good people. I know he basically pinged you probably multiple times to help look at a deal, or you lent him some money, some hard money for him to be able to buy it before he refinanced it, right? And I'm sure he has other folks as well too that he leans on. We literally created a group, David, as you know, to be able to provide that network to our listeners, right? That's where we've kind of spun off this school group, SKOOL, and it's called the Race to the First 5 Rental Properties, where we can potentially provide money. We can provide assistance. We can answer questions. We can bounce ideas off each other. We can have, weekly Zoom calls. So if you want to surround yourself with like-minded individuals that are out there hustling and grinding every day, go join the group. It's a total cost, David, of free, right? So it's still affordable. Inflation hasn't gotten a hold of it yet. So get it while it's hot. It's free. Surround yourself with good people. Ask questions. Be the squeaky wheel. And look where Dan and Katie have gotten in such a short period of time. And it's because they took action. They worked hard. They delayed their gratification, and they surrounded themselves with great people.
At the end of our recording as well, Dan said he is happy to take on a mentee. Dan would like to mentor at least one person to take the journey that he has taken. If you want to any further details how to contact Dan, please reach us at contact@burnyourboatswealth.com. That's contact@burnyourboatswealth.com. If you have any questions or queries or things you agree or disagree with, or things you'd like to hear us talk about, we'd love if you would send us some feedback. If you've enjoyed this episode or any other episode you'd listen to, we'd be really honored if you would share it with one person and ask them to share it with one person. If you get any value from what we're doing, we try hard to create authentic, real stories. So with that, please share one episode with somebody who you think would enjoy it. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. I think Dan was a very inspirational story because he's real. It's not some bonkers nutso 1 in a million story. It's a real story, and it's totally achievable. And there's nothing extra special about it other than the fact that they decided to do things. The doing of it is easy. The hard part is making the decision to do it. So that's why we focus so often on the why, because the why is the part that people trip up on. Listen, we got to go. We got to let you go. So great episode, Clark. Any last words?
Nope. Just go out and take action. And by that, you're going to start to see what you can create. And look at Dan and Katie. They're walking, talking proof. And with that, David, we'll see you guys next time.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Boats podcast with Clark Lunt and David Shaw. We would love to hear from you. Please reach out at burnyourboatswealth.com with comments, questions, and if you have a topic you would like Clark and David to discuss on an upcoming episode. We would very much appreciate it if you took the time to rate and review Burn Your Boats podcast on your favorite podcast listening app, and make sure to follow and share on social media. Content in Burn Your Boats podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not legal or financial advice. Please review our legal disclaimer at burnyourboatswealth.com. Thank you for listening.